Hello, everyone, and welcome back to ELI 1 with Mr. Williamson, your favorite class of the day. The quote of the day is, congrats, everyone, you made it. Today is the last day of Lord of the Flies. We're going to wrap up our novel study today in this lesson. Good job. Congratulations. However, buckle in because the end of the book is as crazy as the rest. So that brings us to the daily objective. I can explain how the conclusion of the novel hints at Golding, that's the author, hints at his view of human nature. So we want to explain how the end of the novel kind of shows us how he views human nature. So good luck, everyone. Let's get started. We're going to be starting on page 191. If you don't have your book or it's not open, go ahead and pause and do that now. When you read with me, you become a better reader. Not only that, but I'm going to ask you to look at some quotes and things like that. So you're going to need to have your novel open. Our focus for these set of pages, we're going to have two sets to conclude our novel. This is the first one. So our focus for these pages, how are Jack and his group communicating? And why do Sam and Eric do what they do? Okay, everyone. So if you recall from yesterday, Jack and his group of savages, they are going to hunt Ralph. Jack and Roger really don't like him, so they're planning this hunt for the next day. Ralph sneaks up to the stone castle to talk to Sam and Eric, who are now part of the tribe. Not really their choice, but and Sam and Eric tells them that they're coming for the hunt. So Ralph says to them, "Hey, see this little hole that's been made in the forest? I'm going to go hide there right next to where the hunt starts. They'll never expect that." So now we come back. He goes and lays in this little cubby and falls asleep, knowing that in the morning he's going to be hunted. So we're going to pick up about 3/4 of the way down the page at 191, where you see the page break at "he was awake before his eyes were open." So he's going to wake up and the hunt is going to be beginning. Remember to focus on what we're focusing on. So he was awake before his eyes were open, listening to a noise that was near. He opened an eye, found the mold an inch or so from his face, and his fingers gripped into it, light filtering between the fronds of fern. He had just time to realize that the age-long nightmares of falling and death were past and that the morning was come when he heard the sound again. It was an ululation over by the seashore, and now the next savage answered, and the next. So an ululation is like a do with that what you will. The cry swept by him across the narrow end of the island from sea to lagoon, like the cry of a flying bird. He took no time to consider, but grabbed his sharp stick and wriggled back among the ferns. Within seconds, he was worming his way into the thicket, but not before he had glimpsed the legs of a savage coming towards him. The ferns were thumped and beaten, and he heard legs moving in the long grass. The savage, whoever he was, ululated twice, and the cry was repeated in both directions, then died away. Ralph crouched still, tangled in the ferns, and for a time he heard nothing. Okay, so first question to you, how does Jack's tribe communicate with each other during the hunt? What was that thing I did? What was it called? Why do you think the author decides to portray them communicating this way? Go ahead and answer that in at least 2 sentences now. Okay, so they communicate with ululations, which I actually spelled wrong. It's U-L-U-L. Ululations. That's the woo-woo-woo sound. This makes them appear like complete savages. It's almost as if they have formed their own language, separate from any other form of communication, for the purpose of hunting and killing. So we return to the first full paragraph on page 192. At last he examined. At last he examined the thicket itself. Certainly no one could attack him here, and moreover he had a stroke of luck. The great rock that had killed Piggy had bounded into this thicket and bounced there, right in the center, making a smashed space a few feet and extend each way. When Ralph had wriggled into this, he felt secure and clever. He sat down carefully among the smashed stems and waited for the hunt to pass. Looking up between the leaves, he caught a glimpse of something red. That must be the top of Castle Rock, distant and unmenacing. He composed himself triumphantly to hear the sounds of the hunt dying away. Yet no one made a sound. As the minutes passed in the green shade, his feeling of triumph faded. At last he heard a voice, Jack's voice, but hushed. "Are you certain?" The savage addressed said nothing. Perhaps he had made a gesture. Roger spoke. "If you're fooling us." Immediately after this, there came a gasp and a squeal of pain. Ralph crouched instinctively. One of the twins was there outside the thicket with Jack and Roger. "You're sure he meant in there?" The twin moaned faintly and then squealed again. "You meant he'd hide in there?" Yes, yes. Oh. Silver laughter scattered among the trees. So they knew. So if that was unclear to anyone, essentially what just happened was that he thought that the hunt had gone past him and he was safe, but then he hears Roger and Jack and what seems like beating one of the twins that he had told where he was going to hide, and the twin tell them that he's hiding under there, like under the brush. Ralph picked up a stick and prepared for battle, but what could they do? It would take them a week to break a path through the thicket, and anyone who wormed his way in would be helpless. He felt the point of a spear with his thumb and grinned without amusement. Whoever tried that would be stuck, squealing like a pig. They were going away, back to the tower rock. He could hear feet moving, and then someone sniggered. There came again that high, bird-like cry that swept along the line. So some were still watching for him. But some? There was a long, breathless silence. Ralph found that he had bark in his mouth from the gnawed spear. He stood and peered upwards to the castle rock. As he did so, he heard Jack's voice from the top. "Heave! Heave! Heave!" The red rock that he could see at the top of the cliff vanished like a curtain, and he could see figures in a blue sky. A moment later, the earth jolted, and there was a rushing sound in the air, and the top of the thicket was cuffed at with a gigantic hand. The rock bounded on, thumping and smashing toward the beach, while a shower of broken twigs and leaves fell on him. Beyond the thicket, the tribe was cheering. Silence again. Ralph put his fingers in his mouth and bit them. There was only one other rock up there that they might conceivably move, but that was half as big as a cottage, big as a car, a tank. He visualized its probable progress with agonizing clearness. That one would start slowly, drop from the ledge to ledge, trundle across the neck like an outsized steamroller. Heave! 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 Ralph put down his spear, then picked it up again. He pushed his hair back irritably, took 2 hasty steps across the little space, and then came back. He stood looking at the broken ends of branches. Still silence. He caught sight of the rise and fall of his diaphragm and was surprised to see how quickly he was breathing. Just left of center, his heartbeats were visible. He put the spear down again. Heave! 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 A shrill, prolonged cheer. Something boomed up on the red rock. Then the earth jumped and began to shake steadily while the noise had steadily increased. Ralph was shot into the air, thrown down and dashed against branches. At his right hand and only a few feet away, the whole thicket bent and the roots screamed as they came out of the earth together. He saw something red that turned over slowly as a mill wheel. Then the red thing was past and the elephantine progress diminished towards the sea. So Jack and his group, essentially knowing where Ralph is hiding, were pushing rocks off the cliff down into where he was, trying to hit him. They got close, didn't seem to do it though. Ralph knelt on the plowed up soil and waited for the earth to come back. Presently, the white broken stumps, the split sticks, and the tangle of thicket refocused. There was a kind of heavy feeling in his body where he had watched his own pulse. Silence again. Yet not entirely so. They were whispering out there, and suddenly the branches were shaken furiously at 2 places on his right. The pointed end of a stick appeared, and in panic, Ralph thrust his own stick through the crack and struck with all his might. Ah! Ah! His spear twisted a little in his hands, and then he drew it again. Oh! Oh! Someone was moaning outside, and a babble of voices rose. A fierce argument was going on, and the wounded savage kept groaning. Then there was silence. A single voice spoke, and Ralph decided that it was not Jack's. "See, I told you, he's dangerous." The wounded savage moaned again. "What else? What's next?" Ralph fastened his hands around the chewed spear, and his hair fell. Someone was muttering, only a few yards away toward the rock castle. He heard a savage say, "No," in a shocked voice, and then there was suppressed laughter. He squatted back on his heels and showed his teeth at the wall of branches. He raised his spear, snarled a little, and waited. Once more the invisible group sniggered. He heard a curious trickling sound and then a louder crepitation as if someone was unwrapping great sheets of cellophane. A stick snapped and he stifled a cough. Smoke was seeping through the branches in white and yellow wisps. The The patch of blue sky overhead turned to the color of a storm cloud, and then the smoke billowed round him. Someone laughed excitedly, and a voice shouted, "Smoke!" So if it was unclear, he's kind of hiding in this back little, they can't really get to him. So what do? They set the little area on fire. He wormed his way through the thicket toward the forest, keeping as far as possible beneath the smoke. Presently, he saw open space and the green leaves of the edge of the thicket. A smallish savage was standing between him and the rest of the forest, a savage striped red and white and carrying a spear. He was coughing and smearing the paint about his eyes with the back of his hand as he tried to see through the increasing smoke. Ralph launched himself like a cat, stabbed, snarling with the spear, and the savage doubled up. There was a shout from beyond the thicket, and then Ralph was running with the swiftness of fear through the undergrowth. He came to a pig run, followed it for perhaps 100 yards, and then swerved off. Behind him, the ululation swept across the island once more, and a single voice shouted 3 times. He guessed that was a signal to advance, and sped away again, till his chest was like fire. Then he flung himself down under a bush and waited for a moment till his breathing steadied. He passed his tongue tentatively over his teeth and lips and heard far off the ululation of the pursuers. There were many things he could do. He could climb a tree, but that was putting all his eggs in one basket. If he were detected, they'd have nothing more difficult to do than wait. If only he had time to think. Another double cry at the same distance gave him a clue to their plan. Any savage balked in the forest would utter the double shout and hold up the line till he was free again. That way they might hope to keep the cordon unbroken right across the island. Ralph thought of the boar that had broken through them with such ease. If necessary, when the chase came too close, he could charge the cordon while it was still thin. Cordon is like the line of hunters. While it was still thin, burst through and run back. But run back where? The cordon would turn and sweep again. Sooner or later he would have to sleep or eat, and then he would awaken with hands clawing at him, and the hunt would become a running down. What was to be done then? The tree? Burst the line like a boar? Either way, the choice was terrible. A single cry quickened in his heartbeat, and leaping up, he dashed away toward the ocean side in the thick jungle, till he was hung up among creepers. He stayed there for a moment with his calves quivering. If only one could have a quiet, a long pause, a time to think. And there again, shrill and inevitable, was the ululation sweeping across the island. At that sound, he shied like a horse among the creepers and ran once more till he was panting. He flung himself down by some ferns. The tree or the charge? He mastered his breathing for a moment, wiped his mouth, and told himself to be calm. Sam and Eric were somewhere in that line, and hating it. Or were they? And supposing instead of them he met the chief or Roger, who carried death in his hands. Okay, so the third box here at the bottom. I got a couple more questions before we move on. So Sam and Eric were somewhere in that line and hating it. Or were they? So question 2, what is it in this quote? Sam and Eric were somewhere in that line and hating it. What is it in this quote? So it is hunting, more specifically hunting Ralph. Which brings me into question 3. Why might Ralph ask himself this question? He says Sam and Eric were somewhere in that line and hating it, or were they? Why might Ralph ask himself this question? Go ahead and answer that now in at least one sentence. So Ralph is wondering if Sam and Eric still have any humanity left, or if they too have been corrupted by Jack's savagery and are now enjoying hunting him. So he's asking himself this question. Are they still human, or have they also been corrupted, and are they now complete savages as well?